Wow. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the beautiful sunshine, and we thank you for this opportunity for us all to get together. And we're so grateful that you've kept us healthy, you've kept us protected. And Father, I pray that as we go about doing things like this, I pray that we would respect the rules so that we won't have problems and that we won't be running into any situations. We want the community to see that we are people who are not rebels, we're not crazy, we're not going to overstep the bounds. We're going to do what the government asks us to unless it should interfere with our relationship with you. So Father, help us to be that kind of people that people can look to and think of us as godly and look to us and see our good works and glorify our Father who's in heaven. We thank you for that. And Father, for those who couldn't be here, maybe some of them couldn't be here because of a fear that they have, we pray, Lord, that you'd comfort them, that you'd give them peace. A lot of people taking this in a fearful way, and they don't need to. But Father, we pray your blessing upon them. Give them peace, keep them healthy, keep them strong. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. There's 3 months have gone by, so there's a lot of thoughts. I know you guys think I don't think, but there's a lot of thoughts going on, and so it's going to be hard for me to communicate because there's so many wonderful things to. And before we start, I wanted to say that if there's anybody here that would like to share with us something positive that's come out of the whole COVID thing, because I know we all have bad stuff that's come out of it, but there's good stuff that's come out of it as well. Anybody got something that just comes to mind? There you go, Wendy.
Okay, well, I don't know how many of you know, but Paul's mom's in a home now, and she's not doing very well. She's actually been put at end of life, and his sister, Aisha, lives in the States, in New York. So you know that there's no going across the borders and stuff. So we were praying like crazy because she came up, I'm getting all teary now. She came up from the States trying to get across the border to see her mom because we don't know how long Paul's mom's going to survive. And they gave her a 24-hour furlough so she could come and see Mama. So she got to see Mama.
Nice.
That's very nice of them. That's good.
So
Yeah.
I thought that was a good thing
That is
because
a
I
good-
prayed like crazy that she'd be able to come because we don't know how long Mama's going to be alive.
Yeah. And the best thing that comes out of that is that you can see that prayer is powerful and effective. That's great.
I just thought that was such an awesome thing that they said you can come, but you got 24 hours and you need to be back here in 24 hours or we're coming after you. So she came up and she had a really quick visit with Mama for an hour or two, and then I think her and the sisters went out for lunch and she went back.
That's good.
So
That's good.
I thought that was a good thing that came out.
Right.
Our family started talking more about the Lord, bringing closer together, realizing the circumstances are pretty, they're not negative, but they're pretty close to what God has said in His Word, So they're talking about these things and training the church and getting telephone calls regularly and everyone else. I'd say it's a positive thing in our behalf.
Yeah. And how about your work? How has it affected your work?
People have confidence in us now, like we didn't do anything that we shouldn't have done. We did the mask, the gloves, and the 10 feet, we were 6 feet.
Yeah.
We just exercised all the rules, and they said we were the most awesome. I got more notes about how happy they were that we were on the front line for the pizza food party.
You're a frontline worker. We thank you for that, Brian. Who can live without pizza? I tell you. That's great. Anybody else? Yes, Nancy Ann.
Well, some of you already know, but my second-born daughter, I hadn't had contact with her for almost 15 years. And she called me when this COVID thing started, crying, saying, "How are you, Mom?" And then I gave her a copy of my book, and she read the poem about herself, and "Till we meet again." So she called me the next night crying, and she said, "I'm so sorry, Mom.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry." And we've had a great time ever since.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Good. Other good news? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a scary thing.
Go ahead.
I don't know how many of you remember a young man, Strand. He's a larger colored fellow in the back. I usually sat in the back a few times. He'd come up to the front, gave his life to Christ. Pastor Brian set us up so that we could get to know each other, but it was for an Uber ride. He would go to Innisfil, pick up his check from his grandpa, and then come back into Newmarket, where he would go to a cash stop, so cash the check, and then bring it back to Keswick. And then it would be it's a decent ride for me. I get almost $100 out of it each time, but more important than that is that I see in his life changes. They're happening slowly because he loves this world. But he's being convicted, and he's asking for prayer, and he's seeing the effects of what godly influence can do. And I praise God that I am able to be there for him, even in a time like this, because the middle seats in my caravan, they fold down, so he can be 6 feet away from me, and I can be in the front, and we can still converse and fellowship. And he is growing ever so slowly, but he is growing in the Lord.
Excellent. Excellent. You just got to go out of your way a bit, eh? Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
You go a bit out of your way, and you can change a life. You know, they see the good works you're doing, and they glorify your Father in heaven. I'll tell you a quick story. This really happened. I won't tell you who or anything because I don't want to steal no one's blessing. But so a family from the church goes and there was a family that they're disabled. So this family went and cut their grass for them because the grass was really long. Their lawnmower was broken. So the family went and cut the grass for them. And the reason I tell you this story is because there was a church family, not from our church, but a church family, lives right across the street from this family. And as soon as the family started cutting the grass for this family, that Christian family came over and said, "Why are you doing that? They have 2 healthy sons that should be cutting the grass." Instead of being, you don't know the circumstances. You don't know that those 2 parents have tried to get those 2 kids to cut the grass, and because of their disability, they're not able to beat them enough to get them to cut the. You don't know the circumstances. So instead of judging, and we do this. I'm guilty of this too. We look at someone pulls in a Range Rover and they come to get some bread. You know, it irks me. But really, I don't know their circumstances. Maybe they borrowed that truck. Maybe they stole it to come here and get bread. Maybe it's not theirs. But the point is, sometimes we look at other people's circumstances and say, well, I'd like to help them, but they really don't need help. And that's not what's going to win them to the Lord. But if that family across the street had said, you know what, every time their lawn gets long, we'll cut ours and we'll cut theirs too. And then eventually the family's going to say, why are you cutting our grass? Well, Jesus told me to. You see what I'm saying? So I learned that through COVID. I saw that situation. I thought, that is really something. So there's a lot of things that have happened over this period of time. And the church, the people, we've never shut down. We haven't been with each other, but we haven't shut down. People are doing stuff. People are still serving the Lord, and it's a really cool thing. I've really enjoyed COVID. So, put this down here so I can spill it easier. So, we're gonna start a series tonight. 10 questions that every follower of Jesus should be able to answer. And some of them might get a little technical, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible because that's the way I like to speak anyway. So I'm not going to be no Ravi Zachariah or Joe Boot or something where you can't understand a word I'm saying. But if I get too far ahead of you, stop me. Just stop me and say, excuse me, you're going too fast. You know what I mean? Or excuse me, Brian, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. Tonight we're going to start with the simple question, how can you know there is a God? What proof do you have that there is a God? Anybody ever asked you that question? No? I guess you don't even know it then. We'll skip on to the next one. Oh, yeah, okay. Karen wants to know. Good. So there is really no other anything that you can bring up that's more. I was with a friend of mine this afternoon, and he loves to irk me. At first, when I first mentioned Donald Trump to him, he got very upset, and I thought, oh, I won't do that again. But now every time I'm with him, he brings up Donald Trump because he likes to irk me. And that's okay because I win every time. Yeah, and everyone's looking at me kind of weird. Now, you Canadians, you got no idea. Okay, so, but anyway, the one name other than Trump that irks everybody is the name of God. When you bring up God, all of a sudden, there's this big controversy. There's this big problem. And so, the topic of God is one that, and it's brought up quite often. It's surprising. I know that when I used to be a drinker, the topic of God was brought up more than I find it being brought up now that I'm not a drinker. When I hang out with people who don't drink, they don't bring up the topic. But drinkers are so dumb, they don't have any clue. Once they've had a few beers, they just, so what about God? You know? And then you got a whole night of talking. How can you prove to me that there's a God? And the funny thing is, I used to fight for God when I was not born again, but I knew the answers because my parents had taught me, and I'd been in Sunday school, and I used to argue for God. There I was, drunk and stoned out of my head, and arguing for God. But it was a good argument, you know, there was a lot of good stuff going on. So we're going to talk about how do we prove that there's a God? What proof do we have? It's a good question. The more that we interact with people, the more you're going to hear these questions come up. The more that you're out sharing the good news about Jesus, the more you're going to hear these questions put out to you. So here we go with this. Over the years, people have made many attempts to prove the existence of God, and they do it with different arguments. And so we're going to look at three arguments that are always put forth. One is the cosmological argument. Cosmological argument. So in simple terms, that means that there's cause and there's effect. So to everything that we know, there has to be a cause. So if we see a meteor and it's hurled down to the earth, that's the effect. So where is the cause? So the cause, we trace it back and we find it was an asteroid belt that this meteor came out of. And so the asteroid belt becomes the cause. But what's the cause of the asteroid belt? Well, that's the Milky Way. And what's the cause of the Milky Way? Well, that's, you know, it just keeps going back and back. And ultimately, there has to be one cause. And that cause can't have a cause. So you can go back as far as you want, but you have to come to a place where there is God. There has to be. When people come and talk to you about Big Bang Theory, that seems to be the most, you know, people aren't really Darwinists anymore. If you listen to their argument on evolutionary theory, they're not Darwinists. They're Big Bang scientists. and they love the Big Bang Theory. But the Big Bang Theory, ultimately it goes back to one singularity. You've got one thing that explodes and causes evolution to begin. But that's the effect, but where's the cause? What's the cause of that singularity? It has to have a cause, and they don't have an answer for you. There is no answer. If you've got two rocks banging together and causing an explosion, where did the two rocks come from? That's the cause. The cause is what started that effect. Where's the cause? The cause always has to come back to some. So if I was to pick between being a follower of Jesus and being a Big Bang theorist, I'd have to say that being a follower of Jesus takes less faith than being a Big Bang theorist.
Amen.
At least I know the cause. They have no clue what the cause is. I don't know. There was this singularity floating around in outer space. They have no cause. So the cosmological argument says that we have an effect, and therefore there must be a cause, and that cause is God. And that's the way that we work that argument. So that's the simplified formula for that. So when people start talking about the Big Bang Theory, best way to counter that is just to say, okay, so where did this singularity come from? Where did the rocks come from that banged together and caused an explosion? Where did the gas come from? You have to have gas to have an explosion. So how did that happen? That's the best argument for that. I don't argue with those people because that's just silliness. I just say we have to have a cause, and you don't have a cause, but I do. My cause is God. Any questions about that? I'm just going to go on. Okay. Second argument used is the teleological. Teleological. Teleo. Teleo is a Greek word, and it means end. It's what?
Pizzaville.
Pizzaville. Hello. It was a rainy day. Yeah. Teleological comes from the word telos, which is Greek for the end. So it has to have, everything has to have an end. There has to be a purpose. A purpose. You don't just have something with no purpose. Evolutionary theory has no purpose. Survival of the fittest. Yeah, but what for? Ultimately, it's just total annihilation. So there's no purpose. So the teleological argument says that we have purpose. There's a purpose to what has been created, and there's a purpose. So if you find like a watch, you find a pocket watch in a field, and this thing you say, has this been brought here by the rains, the weathers, the storms, and is it just a whole bunch of stuff all stuck together? But as you take apart this timepiece, you see that there's gears and there's all kinds of springs, and they all go together. They fit together neatly in this complexity, and this complexity in the end becomes a timepiece. It has a purpose. It has a purpose. So it wasn't just something thrown together and without purpose. It has purpose, and anything that has purpose is teleological. And so the living cell, which is at one time was viewed as a blob of plasmatism, protoplasm. Okay, forget that. So the protoplasm, you've got it's really a complex. The cell is a complex factory of living organism, and it has a function. And like the watch, this sort of complexity cannot be the result of just natural forces. It can't be. It has to have. It's got a perfect design. Therefore, there must be a designer. I think it was Pastor Bella told me that if you have a painting, because she's a painter, if you have a painting, that means there was a painter. So if you have a design, you have a designer, right? I give that to Pastor Bell. I don't know where I heard that really, but I think it was from Pastor Bell.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. So this view, this teleological argument says that the result of a purposeful designer is the result of a complexity is that there is a designer, and that designer is God, and he has a purpose. And so then the third argument that we have, you got the second one, did you understand that? You know, I can't give you notes either. I'm not allowed to pass you anything. I have a box of daily breads I wanted to hand out because they're going to be outdated. I can't hand you anything because that's the law. So what we're going to do is we're going to record this. This being recorded, right? Okay, so we're recording this, so I will send out the address to you so that you can look it up if you have some questions that you missed or something, verses, whatever. Okay? But I'm not allowed to give you notes. I guess I could send them to you on the computer too. Yeah. But so the other proof of the existence of God that we use is called the ontological argument. Ontos is the being. Being is the Greek word ontos. And this argument suggests that God's existence is based on the premise that derived from a source other than observation of the world. So what it is it's an a priori. It's something, it's based on a fact. Well, it's based on what we believe. We're looking at the fact first, and then we're proving that fact. Instead of looking at the proof and then finding that it's a fact. So we're entering with a bias. This is the weakest of all the arguments for God. When you're looking at something based on an idea, I have an idea, now I'm going to prove it. It's not a good way of doing it, but that's the way that some people do it. So before the fact, knowledge can refer to experience to prove its premise, but after the fact, it's not the same, it's the opposite, obviously. So regarding God, the ontological argument argues from the before the fact knowledge that one can conceive of. If we can conceive of a being so great as God, then God must exist.
Amen.
That's what we're saying. If I can conceive that there is a God, this fantastic, incredible God, then he must exist. How else would I figure that out? It's not really a good argument, but it works to an extent. But the problem with that argument is that it can point people to a God. It doesn't have to be our God. And that's the problem. That's why it's so weak, this argument. So if an evolutionist argued on this point, they would stand to do well. But when we look at the final argument is the best argument. This is argument, I call this argument D, or the moral argument. The moral argument says that we all know what's right and what's wrong. We all know it. When the towers in New York were crashed into by the religious fanatics from the Muslim sects, when they crashed into those towers, everybody in the world said that was wrong. Nobody said that, I'm glad they did that. I really hated those towers. No one did that. They said that was a terrible thing that they did. And the world called it murder. But when you ask those terrorists, you say, did you commit murder? No, I didn't commit murder. What I did was for my God. It wasn't murder. It was in obedience to God. And so the moral argument says, we all know what's right and wrong. We might try to justify it like those terrorists did. We do that with the things that we do. But you know what? Honestly, you can try and justify a lie. You tell a lie and you just, well, it wasn't really a lie. It was just a tale. It was a white lie. We try to justify it. If I called you a liar, if you said, okay, yeah, I lied, and I started, instead of calling you Fred, I started calling you liar. Every time I saw it, hey, liar, how's it going? Would you like that? Nobody wants to be called a liar. Nobody wants to be called, and yet most people lie. Nobody wants to be called a thief, and yet most people steal. You don't hear people go, hey, thief. Hey, how you doing, thief? You don't do that. But everybody knows, why do you care if I call you a thief? Well, because stealing is wrong. We all know it. So now what the evolutionist does with this moral argument, because this one is the best argument for God ever. We all have, intrinsically, we have morals. We know what's right and we know what's wrong. Everybody in the world. So then the evolutionists would say, well, there's cultures in this world that don't have the same standards we do. Their morals are different. And they might point to the Inuit, they're Eskimos. They point to the Eskimos and they say, the Eskimos, when they were, years ago when they weren't so cultured as they are now, if food was scarce, they would take one of their seniors and they'd put them on an ice float and send them off to sea. You have to feed your people, and if you can't feed them, you've got to make a choice. So they would let those people starve to death on an ice floe somewhere so that the rest of the tribe could eat. And the evolutionists would say, see, they didn't respect human life. They didn't have morals. But what happens is different cultures interpret the rules a different way. They still have the same standards. And basically what the Eskimo people are doing is they're living by the principle that we all live by that says we need to provide for our own. Well, how they did it might not appear right. I don't think it would be a fun day when we say goodbye to Nancy Ann. We've got her on a nice floe, pushing her out to sea. Yeah, I don't think that would be a very nice thing to do. But you see, they respected the principle. The moral was there. We need to feed our people. The way they did it may not have been correct. And it's the same with all other cultures. We all know what's right and what's wrong, but sometimes we do what's wrong because we're trying to do the right thing. But it's just we've got the principle right, but the way we've carried it through is not correct. And I know we do that even in our own culture. Our culture is bad for when we talk about morals. Why are we trying to kill off old people? Euthanasia, why are we trying to do that? Same thing the Eskimos were doing. Except that we're making up a lie. We're saying, we got to get rid of our seniors because they're eating up all our pension money. They're taking up space, they're taking up, we've got all these reasons why we need to get rid of seniors. Of course, now that I'm almost a senior, I've given this careful thought. But the truth is, we have lots of food in this country, we have lots of money in this country, it's just we're so stinking selfish, we want more. So we're going to try and kill off the people that we figure are of no value, they're not offering anything to our society. So we have the moral, we know it's wrong to kill people, but we're going to try and justify this by saying, well, we need what they're occupying, what they're taking up. Do you understand that? How that works? What? What's that mean, Karen?
It means, what?
What?
What? Okay,
Yeah, to what?
euthanasia, it's funny because we
Yeah.
talked about this. So when all this started and everything with
Mhm.
COVID, friends of mine who are older, family members, said, if I get it and, there's not enough ventilators or whatever, I don't want it. Give it to somebody else.
Sure.
Okay, so we all thought, and then we started talking about, well, what happens if we get through this and you're okay, and then you're older? What does that mean? And his response was, if they're going to keep me alive just so I can be an idiot or a vegetable or, then I want the right to die. I want to say.
Mhm.
So you tell those doctors not to keep me alive just so 5 years down the road I'm a complete vegetable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the same time, I understand the doctors want to keep you alive, but the doctors are interfering with their time to go.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole ethical problem there.
It's
You're right. When we talk about, like when I first started in the insurance industry, the mortality table said that men live to be 72 years old. When I left the insurance industry, it was 83 years old for men. But all I saw was that they were keeping people plugged in for longer periods. They had people they got all these tubes and stuff. Hey, this guy's still alive. Look, we've kept him alive to 83.
Right.
Well, geez, if he died when he was 72, he would have had a lot better life. But I'm not so much, I don't care about death too much. So, but for the average person wants to stay alive. Some people are a little more selfless, but some people, when we start talking about medical assisted suicide, now we're starting, people, I don't want to go through any pain, I don't want to, so take me now. And now, all of a sudden, suicide has become kind of an okay thing, whereas before it was always a bad thing. So again, we have the principle, but it's just that we're trying to work our way around that. Yeah, so our culture is getting just as bad as some other cultures that we've seen try to keep the principle in their own way. Now you just made it very complicated, thank you. No, I know. It's a complicated issue, it really is. It really is a complicated issue. It's the same with, do we unplug our relative or do we leave them plugged in? Am I killing them? It's crazy. It's crazy. So, if God is our standard, then does God command something because it is moral? Or is it moral because God commands it?
Yeah.
In other words, is morality something out beyond God, or is it intrinsically God. And what we have to understand is God, morals are not outside of God. He didn't invent them. It's who he is. Morals are who he is. So when you say God can't lie, is that because God is so powerful that he was able to fight the temptation not to lie? Or is it because he's moral and therefore he can't lie? He just can't do it because that's not who he is. He's intrinsically moral. You see the difference? Good. One person, that was good. Okay. So, is this getting too deep? No, I'm not getting too weird for you? Okay, so in other words, the answer to the question is God morally bound to something that's outside of him, or is God just, he's going to be moral because that's who he is? And the answer is yes, that's who he is. That's his very nature. That's his very nature. He is moral. So he is the standard. It's just as a man cannot cease to be a human male. He cannot do that. A man will always be a man. And God cannot cease to be God. So he cannot lie, because he will always be God. Therefore, he is always moral, and he cannot lie. Because people are created in God's image, we know that from Genesis, they share certain attributes with him. Among them is a sense of when they are in harmony with his essence. We know when we are in harmony with God's essence. When we are morally correct, we know we are. But when we are doing something that we shouldn't be doing, we try to hide. We do. You ever seen a criminal walk away from a crime scene? They usually run, don't they? Why are they running? Is what you're doing wrong? Well, not really. Well, then why are you running? And a cop says that if a man flees the scene of a crime, he's usually guilty. We don't run if we're not guilty. Adam hid in the garden when he sinned. We don't just hide for something. We weren't playing hide and seek. He was hiding because he knew he was no longer in harmony with the essence of God. He was no longer moral. You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Good. I love that. I love that. So, let me jump down. Romans 2. We haven't done any Bible. Let's do some Bible. Romans 2, verses 14 to 15. For when Gentile... Oh, I had to put away the Bibles too, so you got no Bibles in front of you. Sorry, you're not allowed to touch our Bibles. They will get COVID. Yeah. So when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they did not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their consciences also bear witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse and even excuse them. So Gentiles, even though they didn't have the law, they knew the law, because God's put the law, he's put the moral law on the hearts of men. We know when we're right and when we're wrong. Now then you say, okay, well then how do people get to a place where they can do such atrocities as Hitler or Nero or anybody who's a mass murderer? How can these people get to that place if they have morals written by God on their hearts, on their conscience? That's what a conscience is. It's the moral law given to us by God. So how are people able to do that? Anybody know? Except for Paul.
They're sick.
They don't have any morals.
Well, what happened to them? Didn't God write them on their hearts? They hadn't have had morals at one time.
They ignored it.
They ignored it. When you go up, right?
Yeah, can your conscience sneer, maybe?
Yeah, you can sear your conscience, right? You can allow your heart to become hard. It's interesting in when you read the story of Pharaoh. People always say, well, Pharaoh hardened his heart against God. Yeah, he did. But at first, it was Pharaoh hardened his heart against God. But then God allowed his heart to become hardened. And even in Romans, God says, and I turned them over to their depraved minds. It's like you get to a place where you're sinning, and finally God goes, if that's what you want, if that's what you really want, here you go. Take it. There has to come a place where your conscience is no longer involved in your thought pattern, because these people who can kill 6 million Jews and who knows how many other people, how do they do that with the conscience that God gave us? I think that's incredible. But they were able to do it. And when you, even now, I was watching an interesting program. I don't know if you guys be into it. I mean, I like history. And so there's these two guys that were Nazis during the war. They were both like in charge of death camps. One of them has repented. He realized what they did was totally wrong. And he's like totally against it. The other guy is still defending. He's still defending himself. He says, well, I was just doing what I was told. Yeah, but what you were told was wrong. But he won't go there. He's like, no, I did what was right because I was told to do it. And so I was doing the right thing. I was obeying the order. So, and these two guys are meeting face to face. They knew each other during the war, and now they're, in different countries in the world, but now they brought them together, and the one guy who's repentant is trying to talk the other guy into saying, no, we were wrong. We shouldn't have killed all those people. We shouldn't have allowed that to happen. It's an amazing documentary. But this is to watch how the human mind works and how you can actually settle your conscience so that it doesn't even bother you. Oh, no, I sleep good at night. I don't have a problem with that at all. Unbelievable. So, conclusion. I might have got off track. So the conclusion is, various theories have been offered over the years to attempt to prove the existence of God. The cosmological, the teleological arguments, they're strong, but by themselves they do not compel anyone to believe in God. They just don't do it. The task of all followers of Jesus is to continue the discussion from there to show that the generalized God, those arguments can convince people there is a God, but you want to convince them that it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where you want to continue the discussion to. And in order to do that, you have to look at the moral argument, because the moral argument, when you look at other gods do not put morals, impress or write morals on people's hearts. They don't give them a conscience. The other writings from other religions don't do that. It's almost like it's just an evolutionary thing, the moral conscience. And it's not. God gave it to us. He imprinted it on us. We are in His image, and that's part of receiving His image. And you talk to a Hindu, they say, no, we're just good people because we train ourselves to be good people. We train ourselves to know what's right and wrong according to what our gods would tell us. What do their gods tell them? What does a Muslim God... probably no one in this room has read the Quran. Am I correct in making that assumption? Oh, maybe Pastor Val has. Oh, and Karen, because she's just like a little hippie girl. So...
No.
Yeah, I know. It's a fascinating book, but if you even just take... I don't want to encourage... Like, hardly any of us read our Bibles. I don't want to encourage you to read a Quran. But if you just read the first 2 chapters of the Quran, you will see that their God is wildly crazier than our God, and He doesn't teach anything except destruction. He wants you to kill these people. If these people will not follow me, you kill these people. If these people do this, you kill these people. It's incredible. It's a book of hatred. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But nobody reads it, so no one really knows. Oh no, not all Muslims are vicious people. Well, then they're not Muslims. They haven't read the Quran. So, what I'm saying is that our God says, I put morals, I write them on your hearts. I've given you your conscience. So everybody in the world that thinks this is right and this is wrong, that's from God. And no evolutionist can argue. They can't say, well, that was passed down generation to generation. They can't do that, because that means that if it's inherited as an evolutionary idea, if it's inherited in me that I have morals, then what about those who don't have morals? Did they inherit that? Did that come down through the gene machine? Is that what happened? Because then you can't say to them that are immoral, you can't say you're wrong. You can't do that, because that's what they inherited. That's who they are. So the evolutionists can't argue moral argument. They can't argue against you. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what to pray for as we ought. But the Spirit Himself, He intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And He who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. You see, those who are His should also remember that beyond such arguments, they can find comfort in knowing Him. They can find comfort through the power of His Spirit. Yeah?
What's the scripture reference for that you just quoted?
Romans, something?
Thank you. Helpful. 14 chapters.
Romans 8. Read all of Romans 8. It's all in there. So how do we prove that God exists? Go to the moral argument. Go to the moral argument. Ask someone, how do you know what's right and what's wrong? Well, my mama told me. Well, your mama told you this and his mama told you that. But you both came to the same standard. How did you arrive there? Some mothers are out there, I have seen mothers teaching their children how to steal. I've seen that. Does that kid know when she grows up, does she know stealing's wrong? She certainly does. She certainly does, even though her mother taught her it was okay. Your parents might have said it's okay to hate people. Now that you're older, you're saying, you know what, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to hate people. Your mama might have taught you to hate black people.
She was my dad for Jews.
See? Some of us were taught to hate certain kinds of people when we were small, but as I get older, my conscience kicks in, my morals kick in, I say, no, it's not right to hate anybody. You know? So it doesn't really matter. You can't say it's environmental. Well, I was raised in the South, therefore I hate anything that's black. What excuse is that? I'm Irish, therefore I fight. I'm fighting Irish. There's no excuse. I have to drink whiskey, I'm Irish. No, shut up. You have morals. You know what's right and wrong. It was given to you by God. It has to be God. It can't be evolution. It can't be a couple of rocks banging together. So there's the argument. Questions? Concerns? Yes, ma'am?
If anybody wants any more resources on apologetics, I can certainly give them lots of hints. There's an app on your phone called Stand to Reason. And if you ever want to look up some of those informations, it's all on there. It's fantastic. Basically, it says all of those arguments, the teleological, deontological, and so on. Put all of those together, you have a very good case for evidence for God. We don't ever say there's proof, because that's, people think of that in terms of science.
Yeah.
So if the evidence for God is almost insurmountable when you put all of those arguments together, but any one of them on their own is insufficient.
Right. Now next week's going to be a little bit easier topic, and it's going to be, how do I know the Bible's true? Because now you've proven to someone that there is evidence for God. They're going to say, well, what about the Bible? That's where everyone always turns. And there's websites. Oh, I was looking. There's so many websites on how to criticize the Bible, how to find the Bible is not correct. Incredible. But I'm going to show you next week how we can prove that the Bible is true, how it's the truth, and the truth sets us free. So that's what we're going to look at next week. Yes, sir?
Doesn't it say in the New Testament that all Scripture is inspired by God?
It does.
So we can refer to that as evidence of God.
How's that evidence?
Could be what?
Hmm?
Because you have a Bible that says that all Scripture is inspired by God.
I know, but we're trying to say if the Bible's reliable. How do I know that that's a reliable statement you just made? It came out of the Bible.
Using God's word.
Yeah.
You gotta prove
It's like saying, well, God told these guys what to say because it says, "Thus says the Lord." Therefore, God spoke it all. Well, the problem is that Bible reliable? You're reading to me from that Bible. How do you prove to me that Bible's real? So,
It's even a true book, right? That's what they're gonna say.
is it a true book?
Is it just something that you had somebody write up that,
Well, most people say to me that their favorite thing to say is, Oh, people spoke it to this person, it's broken telephone, the thing is so, and that's why you have so many versions. Yeah, you just have so many versions because people want to make a lot of money. John Hagee version, Ben Hinn version. Anyhow, we'll look at that next week. It'll be good. It'll be good. This has been very nice.
Yeah.
Man, having somebody in these seats after 3 months, oh, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. Even if you just came to encourage me, that's beautiful.
You can get some cutouts of us and just put us in places.
Cutouts don't do the same. They don't talk back to me, Paul.
Oh, you did miss that.
Oh, no? I missed you, Karen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. John, can I get you to close this up with prayer? Thanks, man.
So thank you for the truth that we can investigate and look at
Mhm.
and see the evidence that God is real. And He's real in our lives. You've proved to us, and we've seen the proof.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father, for those who believe the truth and help proclaim it. And Father, help empower us to share that with others, because other people need to know the truth, that God is real, and there's accountability coming in the future. So Father, help us to understand these things, to learn them, to dig into them deeper, and that for our own selves to learn and to practice sharing it. Father, thank you for the blessings of God's word, and that God is in our life and active and working us. Help us to be helping other people to be at work. I ask in Jesus' name.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.